Welcome, everyone. Today we have Daniel Rekshan of the D-SETI project. That is the Dream Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And we are going to explore the contacting of non-human intelligences utilizing the dream state, if I'm correct on that.
That's
And
right.
yeah, so let's go for it. So can you tell me a little bit about D-SETI?
Yeah, so D-SETI stands for either the dream search for extraterrestrial intelligence or the dream study of extraterrestrial intelligence. And there's a bit of ambiguity built into the name, actually. It's sort of based around the SETI idea, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. But instead of using expensive radio telescopes to look for signals, we're using dreams. And we understand like lucid dreams to kind of be connected with psychic dreams or telepathic dreams, or dream shamanism is the primary kind of understanding I bring forward with D-SETI, is around dream shamanism as a way to contextualize lucid dreaming and dream telepathy or contact with entities in dreams. So that's what it's all about. And yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I was a part of the SETI at Home project back in the day when they used decentralized computing, where you would have that anytime your screensaver would come on, it would utilize some of your unused CPU cycles to process chunks of data from usually from the Arecibo telescope. And so, yeah, SETI, I'm very familiar with that. And I immediately, made the connection in my mind when I saw your project. And I've been watching some of your videos and I found it very fascinating. And I'm really happy that we were able to have this conversation today. And thank you for agreeing to come on my channel to talk about this. What led you to believe that dreams could be used as a medium for contacting non-human intelligences? Actually, before we get into that, maybe we can discuss what non-human intelligence actually means, or extraterrestrial intelligence.
Sure. I like getting into that conversation because there's terms like NHI, that's non-human intelligence, extraterrestrial, that's ET, so people are familiar with that. There's been a transition from the words like UFO and ET to UAP and NHI, and that's happened in the last 10 years or so. During that transition, actually, it was really interesting. People used to call NHIs extraterrestrial / extra dimensionals to kind of go like, we don't know if they're from another planet, they're from somewhere else. And so that's where you get ideas like ultra terrestrials or time travelers or something like that. So that's where the occult idea can kind of come in. And I know some of your audience has a familiarity with the occult, so I'll kind of talk about that in the astral experience. But yeah, so the sense of NHI or UAP, UFO, so these are all ideas we have about what explains certain mysteries. And some of those mysteries are lights in the sky. Other of those mysteries are encounters with entities. And all of our understanding about NHI, I think, come originally in part from dreams. And there's a big, long way to get there. And there's a lot to unpack around that. But by the way, I have a free course that's 3 hours long. It goes from UFO disclosure to dreams and back again to the SETI mission. So it literally explains each step of the way why we go from UAPs to UFOs and how they relate to ETs and how ETs relate to dreams. And it really centers around alien abduction narratives, how we understand alien abduction, what that actually is, how we're interpreting it, how that in part maybe even relates to occult ideas and things like that. So that's what we're talking about with NHI and UAP. It's sort of a UFO, a light in the sky, maybe an orb, maybe an energy being, some sort of encounter that you have. There's synchronicities associated with it, paranormality. And so if you're not really familiar with UFOs, but familiar with the occult, you might recognize it as an occult thing. If you're not familiar with occult stuff, you might recognize this kind of encounter with ETs or alien abduction narratives. So that's a bit of a long answer to explain a few short words. Non-human intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And now if anybody wanted to take that course, would that be at the D-SETI.org website?
Yes, it is at the D-SETI.org website. I'm still trying to find a great way to link from there to the new e-learning platform. So I know for a fact, and we're still hooking up the URL, so I'll send you the proper URL after this, but right now the
Okay.
remember.dseti.org is the domain, subdomain that points to the e-course. And
Okay.
if anyone is confused, you just email me at daniel@dseti.org. I'll give you the email or the URL.
Okay, perfect. We'll add that in the description of the video. Now, what got you on this project? Like initially, what sparked the whole Dream SETI project initially?
Yeah, the dreams obviously themselves. So like what got me to think about how I can contact ETs and things like that. There's a couple of answers. Technically or academically, the answer for me comes from my graduate school work at the California Institute of Integral Studies. I studied East-West psychology, and my professor there, one of the professors there, had an inquiry methodology called the terrapsychological inquiry methodology. That's a lot of big words to say. If you're inquiring about something, you can do so in relationship with the consciousness of the earth. And so the questions that were asked oftentimes in this way of asking questions were like, tell me about the human psyche, or what about the dynamics with my mother, or what is going on with the folklore of this history. And so researchers could then dream, understanding that the dream is a communication from the greater consciousness of the earth or the collective unconscious. And so using dreams as a way to bring in knowledge or insight into an inquiry was already part of my like education at this point, and an acceptable way of doing research, which is sort of what gave me the idea to do that. But because I had dreams of ETs and encounters and a whole complex around alien abduction in my own experience, that drove me forward. But I go, oh, I actually can just use dreams as a way to inquire about things because of this education. And so I went on a journey actually in part because of this methodology. It says you go to the places on Earth. If you're curious about, I don't know, some place or some history, go to that place and have some dreams, pay attention to your dreams there. So I went to Chaco Canyon in the American Southwest, which was said to be a place where aliens came and interacted with people. And I also went to England and I looked at the work of Dr. John Dee and his magical talisman that he used to contact angels. So I dreamed in both places, and those dreams were so powerful, I just pushed them away for 5 years. I was like, I can't deal with this. This is crazy. It makes me scared of the world. And so 2020 happened, and then I was like, oh, this world is nuts. I have to understand. I can't work in the way I've been working. I have to do something different. What's in my heart to do? And so it was like, oh, I have to get into this inquiry again. I have to do this dream work again. I have to open that up. And so for the last 5 years, I've been really pursuing that very strongly. And the notion of D-SETI came through this dream inquiry I've been on, trying to make sense of my own abduction stuff. And literally the angels I got in contact with through Enochian magic told me to do what I'm doing now. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Wow,
I called
yeah.
it Cosmic Dream Sanctuary beforehand, and that wasn't really resonating with people. And I was like, angels, help me out. And they're like, call it D-SETI. Work, like pretend is completely like acceptable to Western materialists. Like the SETI mission is actually, right? And so, and I found the literature in Western research literature to go like, actually, this is a peer-reviewed study about dream telepathy. It shows this. There's a grounding to it. So they told me to really ground it in this idea of Western materialism. Yeah.
Very cool. So it's similar to the idea of how people are using the terms like NHI or UAP rather than the old words that have a lot of baggage like UFO and alien and that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah, there's a tricky thing we're doing with the language. I think I'm doing something opposite as to what they're doing, right? I'm adopting a more materialist language, thinking about SETI, right? And this sort of SETI notion or accomplishing the SETI mission, which is a scientific organization. It has a scientific, like you talked about SETI at home. I really would envision a collective citizen science thing where people share a dream or 10 or whatever, and then we analyze it. And there's ways to seed people's dreams, like dream incubation I'm so inspired by the notion that we could do citizen science together in a very like low impactful way, like running a screensaver, right? Like you run a screensaver and you send your dream the next day, or you watch a 4-minute video or 30-second, right? Like, and that could be actually an experiment, and we could get communications back in ways that feel provable to me if we were to do that. And so that's in part some of the mission and work I'm doing.
So you mentioned integral studies. Is that connected with Ken Wilber in any way?
Yeah, so the integral studies does come from Ken Wilber. In part, there's a rich, confusing tradition, just like UFOs, right? Integral study comes from a couple of different ways. One is when Eastern spiritual masters in the 60s came over to and Western psychologists kind of started studying them. There was this inner cultural dialogue happening. That's in part integral, and then Ken Wilber's whole work is integral. So those kind of work together actually, and use the same word to refer to themselves. And I've gone in education in both ways that are overlapping, and happy to talk further about it. But in essence, yes, it's like Ken Wilber, and that in part is really helpful because that gives us an ability to integrate the subjective and objective ways of looking at things, or the inside or outside or individual collective. And that's all about bringing together these different ways. And I would say dreams, especially dreams of others and NHI, kind of invite us to bring a couple different perspectives together.
Very cool. And I want to get into the Enochian magic stuff, but first, before we get there, I kind of wanted to talk a bit about how a lot of abduction experiences seem to take place in a state similar to sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that connection there?
Yeah. So in order to talk about this in a kind way, to speak, because it involves people's identities at this point, right? Mm-hmm. People are identified with being abductees. There's a spiritual identity around it. There's a cultural identity. There's a lived experience that we can never invalidate, but there's ways we interpret that experience. And so I have to justify in part why I'm talking about these things publicly, because going, hey, this looks like a sleep paralysis experience, right? And if someone goes, no, I'm an abductee, this is my whatever, stop debunking me. I have to be cautious around that. And the reason why I talk about this is because, first off, the ways we know about abduction are problematic. And there's a lot of literature we need to bring into it's a literature discussion in part, like how we know about what alien abduction is, comes through misinterpreting people's sleep paralysis dreams. Literally and truly, if you add up the numbers of encounters used to justify the UFO abduction syndrome idea, then you would identify that they are really based in dreams and sleep paralysis, most of them. Now, there's other experiences that come in, but it really shows up around the 1990s alien abduction research, and that all brings in these sleep paralysis notions. So this is all in the course, but this is the connection between modern UFO narratives that we're now calling UAPs. Anything you read in the news now has to do with a notion of UFOs that was defined in part through the 2017 New York Times article called Black Auras and Glowing Auras and Black Money. It reported on Robert Bigelow's work with the US government. So if there's actually like US government studies with UFOs. This happened through Robert Bigelow's work. The reason why I'm talking about that is because that person, Robert Bigelow, funded research into alien abduction in the 90s. And he defined it in collaboration with Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, and John Mack, who all defined the UFO abduction syndrome in terms of sleep paralysis symptoms, like being paralyzed, seeing an entity in the room, lights in the sky, feeling as if you're flying and not knowing why, losing time, that sort of thing. That all those, they defined it in terms of those things. Then they presented on Oprah accounts that look very similar to sleep paralysis, and they go, this is UFO abduction. And then there's a big jump from that to these UFOs in the sky that like people like Ryan Graves or like the Tic Tac or whatever you're seeing, those are aliens. But it's done kind of a sleight of hand way, saying there's these abduction experiences, UFO stuff. So the reason why I'm talking about sleep paralysis and connection with UAPs is because it's really related back to that 90s research, the research in the 1990s. I hope I'm being clear at this point how that connects back. It's like literally when we talk about it, it's because in the 1990s, Robert Bigelow actually sent, he made a booklet about it. He made a booklet. He funded a research project on it, and he sent the booklet to 100,000 mental health workers saying, these sleep paralysis symptoms equal UFO abduction. If these sleep paralysis symptoms, then do hypnosis to recover their abductions. And that's basically what he said. And he engaged the mental health community for like years in this. He had conferences around the US, and those conferences engaged the people like Linda Moulton Howe, who define our understanding of like Whitley Strieber, like all these things that it's like it brought in all like Leslie Kean, like all of this stuff comes together through that work in the 90s. That was based on the interpretation of sleep paralysis experiences as something more. So I personally believe these encounters are more than sleep paralysis hallucinations, that they reveal real interactions, and that those real interactions can leave marks on the body or give you metamaterials or lights in the sky phenomena or encounters. But those encounters are very similar to what you described with the Morrigan, right? Like there was a presence in the room. It was real, but also there's a continuum experience. And so that's what I believe they are. But we did not have the sophistication in the 90s to admit that gradation and spectrum. We were like, either it's a dream or it's real. It's definitely real. Let's go to town with that. And then you get all these absurd things and you're like, why is the occult connected to UFOs? That doesn't make any sense to me. But if it's like a dream shamanism experience, like the Morrigan, right? Imagine if instead of an old Celtic deity, it's some sort of sci-fi amalgamation of psyop thing or whatever showing up in your room, which does happen or whatever, and leaves a mark on your body. And you're like, okay, this is a thing. So that's a very long answer to your question. I'm happy to hear any other questions related to it or parse that out again.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you clarified that, because we do live in a very wake-centric society where people use the word dream to mean unreal. Yeah. Right? Like even like saying, oh, that's a pipe dream, or it's just a dream. You hear these types of terms all the time. And so when you try and classify an experience as like happening in sleep paralysis, people are like, oh, well, then that means it's not real. I don't feel that way personally. I have a very different perspective, that I feel that both the waking experience and the asleep dreaming experience and everything in between is real and unreal, is just as real and unreal as each other.
Yeah.
And and you alluded to an experience that I had where I was just sitting on my bed, awake as anything. I wasn't lying down. I wasn't asleep. I was just sitting there on my bed. And then I found myself in what I like to call a liminal state. And I didn't intentionally trigger that state change, and I had an experience with an intelligent being, which I later identified as the Morrigan, the Celtic goddess. And it was very intense. And I have a video where I explain that in detail. And then I felt myself, after the encounter was over, I felt myself going through a gradient back into the normal waking state again, almost like I was released from it, or I was pulled into it for the encounter and then released from it, is how it felt to me anyways. And in our initial email that we had when I invited you on the show, you had mentioned that you had some sort of encounter with the Morrigan as well, or dealings with the Morrigan in some way or another. Can you share a bit about that?
Yes. It comes by way of my work. So I work with people primarily. My primary work is working with people in their dreams. And so people will, or hypnosis. And so in 2020, I opened my practice and they said, okay, if you're an experiencer of missing time and want to understand that, you traditionally go through a regression, a hypnotic regression. Now there's controversy regarding hypnotic regression. The insight I had was, no, the hypnotic regression actually looks exactly like a shamanic dream state. It looks like an induced dream state. And if we treat it just like that, which sometimes has side effects like memory comes up and things like that, but it's primarily just we're doing dream work with it, then I can actually just work with someone and not step into those controversies of false memory or these, are aliens real or not? I go, doesn't matter to me. I'm just doing dream work here. So that was what I ended up doing for about 5 years. And then interestingly, right, half of my stuff was really magically focused actually, because I tuned into the Enochian work. And so sometimes I'm sharing this because it gives a kind of context for how this interaction with the Morrigan comes into my existence, right? It's very similar to the Abraxas interaction, and it comes by way of people I work with, right? So when I work with someone, I go through, I now understand it to be a sort of shamanic journey. And so I take them through certain steps of going into trance, connecting with guidance, interpreting that work. We establish a sense of sacred space and things like that. So we work in this very intimate way. It's non-dual. I would describe it as non-dual. So you're sharing dreams with me. I'm sharing some interpretations or experience with you. Now, I pay attention to my own dreams and my own symbols for my own personal life, but sometimes transpersonal things like shared synchronicities happen, and those guide my interaction with the session. Like if, for instance, I have a dream before the session, I go, hey, by the way, I had this dream. And they're like, oh my God, I had this dream too. Right. Then I go, that's meaningful. I have to interpret that in a specific way or bring that into the table. And so the communications I've had with the Morrigan are sort of by way of a client's own experience. I went through a regression experience where there's an interaction. So imagine if you were to kind of be like, I'm curious what happened in that state. I might have remembered more. I want to explore this more in a shamanic way or in a trance way. You might work with me, and then you would have that interaction with the Morrigan. I'm there as a practitioner writing notes, making questions. I feel the energies somewhat. They're mediated in part through my own situation, but I'm sometimes observing synchronicities in my life or powerful omens and things like that. So this one is sort of meaningful to me because of the, I feel tested in part by her. And I'm sort of halfway through the test. This is a reminder. I have a to-do list actually after this call to accomplish what I've been called to do. So I'm sorry if this is a little, I don't have full understanding of the interaction I'm having with her, because it feels real. Like, oh my God, when people work with me and they share their experience, like I'm there in part, and it's sort of like a shared dream experience, even though it's waking. And then it's like, oh my, like I had no idea, because oftentimes I've not pushed up against these energies, or these are very intimate relationships, right? Like you've got Crow is your last name, right? Crow is your last name. That has a family lineage to it. There's like power and energy and communication. And I go like, if I just tune into Crow, for me, that means something else. But if I turn into crow for you, oh my God, that gives me a richness. And I only know 6 sentences you've said from some videos, right? And then I'm like, oh, but if we spent 3 hours working together, right, that crow then might mean something so special to me. So that when a crow lands and like shakes off a feather, and those feathers are in a certain triangle or whatever, I'm just making stuff up now. Then I go, that actually is my interaction with crow as you understand it. If it kind of blends into this sort of situation. And so I had an interaction like that with a Morgan, and it for me is related functionally with dream memory, recall of dream. Am I willing to recall my dreams or not? And the reason being is the person is paying me in a talisman of a dream recall talisman or whatever. And so as a dream practitioner, I have this sort of tension. I don't know if you've experienced it about whether or not I want to recall my dreams. And so this is sort of the world testing me publicly. It's like your dream coming in, or your connection with the Morgan's test. So this is all I'm just sharing with you. This is in part a kind of secret way of working with my clients and dreams that oftentimes I sanitize in academic language, but I feel sort of more comfortable to share with you as someone who is a dream creature, it feels like, in part. So
yeah, dreaming is basically my thing. But I do come from it typically from a more occult, the more occult side of things. And I do find the whole NHI and UAP research community absolutely fascinating, and the overlap there. And it seems like the overlap has been growing in public consciousness lately. And one of the things I wanted to mention, when you describe the way that you work with clients, it actually reminds me a lot of how Dee and Kelly would have worked back in the day when they were contacting these Enochian entities that describe themselves as angels, right?
yes, I'm glad you pick up on that. I mean, I turn to how they work together in part to literally just inform how I work with people. Like I said, I went to London to dream in places like Mortlake, where he was, to connect with whatever spirit was lingering there to gain insight about contact. And so there's a lot of insight that comes from his journals, and I'm glad you can pick that up and see that. I mean, I personally believe that John Dee is more influential in the practice of hypnosis than Mesmer, right? Like, I believe that in terms of the ET regression hypnosis thing that's happening, but people don't know that. That's not actually like literally connected. So because there's been such a pushing away of, because it's occult, it's an occult thing. So like people won't say that. So the guy go like, what does Mesmer have to do with this type of hypnosis that comes forward? And that's really one of the things that I would just shout to the world, is there's actually 2 types of hypnosis used in service to UFOs. One is actually a clinical hypnotherapy by trained clinical hypnotherapists, and then another is this really bizarre form of spiritual interaction that's just kind of like what Dee and Kelly do, but it's described in the terms of clinical hypnotherapy. They use regression hypnosis, somnambulistic states of consciousness. They talk about these things with this guys, but it's actually just untrained hypnotists or self-trained hypnotists kind of copying over clinical language, even around the kind of UFO abduction syndrome stuff. That was the thing that is shocking to me, is in the research, it all points back to Johnny Mack, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he was trained by Bud Hopkins, who was an untrained hypnotist, to do this work. He wasn't actually trained through his psychiatry education whatsoever, and the stuff he brings in isn't relevant, and it's just going like, oh, everyone just misunderstood this about John Mack, was that he was a dream worker or was a dream expert, but he was an expert in psychoanalytic dream theory, and he wasn't an expert in hypnotherapy whatsoever, and they just assumed he was and knew what he was talking about. So now everyone says all these sleep paralysis experiences are not dreams, they're real, because John Mack says it. But then you go back to it and it's just he doesn't know what he's talking about, and it's really unfortunate. So that's why I say there's two types of hypnotherapy, and one type feels very similar to the D and Kelly. That's the type I do, but I talk about clinical hypnotherapy because you have to when you talk about this.
Understood. Now, getting into the realm of speculation here a little, what were they contacting? What was contacting them?
Oh, good question.
D and Kelly.
Yeah. That's a very good question, right? So occult practitioners might recognize things. Dreamers might recognize things. Angel communicators recognize. ET, like everyone recognizes some element there. Is it an angel? Is it alien? Is it both? Is it a demon? Those are all very good questions. For me, in part, I always understand, and this is through dream work, is I always understand contact through these means is ultimately always with the self. So just like with dream work, you can go like, what does that, like, if you were that nightmare monster, what insight would that bring? If you were that nightmare's monster's like knife or whatever, like, what would that mean? Like, why are you dreaming about? What does that knife remind you of? And then you go, oh, actually, this reminds me of this and that. And then you go, oh, this is why it's important to me today, is because all of these themes relate to what I'm going through. And so that's one aspect of dream interpretation where you go, this is all a message from the self and to the self about the self. That is ultimately the stance I take about whatever they're contacting. The understanding that we are all the self at a mystical level, and that it trickles down through a hierarchy of beings, some of which we can apply specific names and categories to, like angel or demon or alien, right? There's a little bit of a mixture. Primarily, if you're familiar with Edward Kelly and D, there's a sense of deception and manipulation. D was a spy, and Edward Kelly was said to be a counterfeiter and a con man. So like
right.
It's really hard. It's really hard to parse that stuff out as to what actually is going on. I believe D thought he was talking to angels, but angels by way of what? And so we have to interpret that through like I know he spent time reading Trithemius's work, right? He copied over Trithemius's drawing spirits into crystals right beforehand, and that's all about a bunch of different stuff. But like you can't at that point, that text demonstrates that John Dee had an understanding that angelic communication can be many things and not just angel communication. And so I speculate that they communicated with angels, and they communicated with egregores, and they communicated with daemons. And I mean, I've gone through my own communication rituals, and I burnt them afterward, or some of them, primarily because there is an entity type that I call the lurking ones, but I believe there's something like a daemonic kind of egregoric expression of British empire expansion. So technological expansion of political empire has a kind of expression in the spirit world as these lurking ones or these angels, in that they are sort of like, I connect that with alien abductors or the evil alien kind of idea, but there's a whole spiritual grimoire that is in part constructed by these people that is in service to technological expansion of empire. And so when we're seeing this sort of space stuff and AI stuff, there's an expansion of political empire, and there's spirits or helping spirits, or I don't know, like war god spirits associated with that, that Enochian kind of talks to. Do you have a sense as to what they might have been talking to, or how does this resonate with you?
I mean, yeah, that definitely resonates, because you see this happen all throughout history, not just at one time. You know, like Project Stargate and the CIA document that was released where they did a report on the gateway process and interacted with entities when they experience these out of body states, and trying to utilize those for, government purposes. And you always hear about the Russians doing it as well. And
Yep.
they're trying to gain power through contact with these non-human intelligences, or at sometimes you hear them refer to them as non-corporeal entities, and that sort of thing. And so this has been going on for quite a while, and not just in Dee and Kelly's day. And so I do feel like there is something there, but that there's also a lot of experiences that people have which are more personally transformative and transcendent, and that sort of thing, where it's not about trying to gain power and empire and that sort of thing.
Yeah, my personal experience with the Enochian, right? So I'll talk from that perspective. I got in contact with descendants, future descendants, myself from various timelines, my ancestors, nature spirits, specific elementals, God, like a whole menagerie of everything. Like I thought I thought it was just aliens. I thought I would contact aliens, and it was like, whoa, there's so much more to this world, And so then, yeah, there's a lot in there. Personally, I have a contact. I mean, I think the Enochian in itself is a sort of artwork, right? Like it's a reflective thing. So you bring something and that activates you, but then there's a thing that is communicated through the actual language or the structure of the rituals. And I'm glad you connect it with Stargate and the Gateway program. That's a really big question in my mind. That's what's going on. And yeah, I mean, the surprising thing is I thought I would find evidence for like physical alien bodies and craft and things like that. And that is not necessarily what is coming forward. It's a much more complex, nuanced view that involves definite realities of entities like what you're talking about, acting through these sort of complex ways like Gateway and Stargate. So it takes a kind of complexity to relate to it and work with it. And I'm excited that, the astral projection and lucid dreaming aspects you're representing are kind of interested in the NHI conversation as well. So that's just sort of kind of coming full circle, as I see.
Yeah, I think there's people coming at it from both directions, really. And some of the interactions that I've had were with entities, you could call them, or you could even call them dream characters, depending on the language you want to use, right? But I have encountered entities in dream states where they were malevolent toward me. And I've been able to do further work with some of those entities and experience some sort of a cathartic release, which felt healing when I was able to kind of approach it with what's the word, unconditional love and acceptance. And it's like a type of shadow work, right? And it connects with the shamanic type of dream work that you were talking about before, where you can interact with these entities and explore vulnerabilities and traumas and have cathartic releases and healing and that sort of thing. So that's another type of experience that I've had with these types of entities, where sometimes I initially encountered them within a dream or a lucid dream in particular, and then I've gone back through active imagination, which I like to refer to as mental projection, where you're not fully immersed in an astral experience where you still retain some minor awareness of your physical body. You could speak, you could even potentially write or dictate what's happening. And I've gone back and explored interactions with some of those entities that I had encountered in lucid dreams, and or I've done the same thing within a fully lucid dream or astral projection state as well. Although it seems to be a little more difficult to maintain the state long enough to do a lot of that really productive work.
Yeah.
Although sometimes you can.
Yeah, most of my powerful experiences in these states are sometimes sustained by my own activities. But this is why I talk about, like, this is why I'm interested in, like, lucid dreaming, but alien abduction, and there's something else that's not explained by the lucid dreaming, is because my explorations of those realms, I'm not able to like fully, I'm not able to like all right, I'm going to lucid dream and then have a wonderful flying sex experience. Like, great. But I can't do that. What ends up happening is like, I used to call it the astral wind, but I would be just taken to these encounters, right? And these encounters or these things, they would reach out to me, I would reach out to them somehow, and it would be uncanny in a way that I was not trained by my culture to ground into, right? It has elements where it's like the Luciferian stuff that sometimes surrounds like your communications, right? Like would terrify me as a kid, but you have to be able to move into those spaces of the darkness and the light to integrate some of the messages from the dreams. And so, so I'm still, this is in part what the test of the Morgan or whatever for me is, right? Like, is like, am I willing to risk that? Am I willing to risk that when I go to sleep or not? Am I willing to say yes to it? And even at this point, 5 years into working with missing time experiencers and magic people and in like fae folk and whatever, I go like, I don't know. I'm like, my body wants to nap instead of write those dreams down. And I want to pretend I want to pretend like TV is more important than like sleep paralysis entity encounters or whatever. But actually today is sort of the test is like, nope, it's actually, I have to, I'm showing up. 5 minutes later, like we sort of synchronistically or kind of we're like, let's do it, right? Like, let's have a conversation. And so I'm saying yes, because you're being that harbinger of dream to me, to go, are you willing to do that? To say yes to the dream, right? Like that kind of thing. I go, yeah, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to see that through. And so in part, that's a sort of interaction that I see between me and the other side. That's what sustains my dreaming practice. It's not who I am as a lucid dreamer. It's not that I've read Stephen LaBerge's books like 4 times and done what he said to do, right? I've done that, but it's not, that's not the source of power here. It's the interactions with the other side and what we call non-human intelligences, or what has been identified as that, right? And so it's sort of, there's a lot there for me. And so the sense of being able to even bring something to those states is sort of like, I'm actually just being who I am and developing as a person. And sometimes those states happen and sometimes the beings reach out through them, but I'm sort of allowing it and being with it. And that's how the work happens. And I want to be honest about that, because as a dream teacher, sometimes I go, people sometimes think I'm able to like dream into them or like do all sorts of things or magic things. And I'm like, I'm just doing this, which is actually magic, but is a very sort of humbling magic, let's say.
Yeah, well, I found it fascinating, some of the synchronistic connections about our meeting that you had shared with me, about how like that you had already been aware of me a little bit beforehand, and a video was up when I had contacted you or something like that. And I really resonate with the idea of that test as well, because my interaction with the Morgan, I didn't call that. I didn't initiate that. I didn't call the Morgan. I didn't even realize that it was a Morgan until much, much later when somebody had pointed something out to me, and I was like, I did some research, and I was like, that is clearly the Morgan, that I was communicating with, and I didn't realize it for years. And it was something unbidden, and it was deeply transformative, even though I didn't even realize who it was. I didn't, like you said, I didn't have that cultural grounding to recognize who that entity was. I just kind of understood that it was some sort of dark goddess connected with death and that sort of thing. And that gets me into the connection of beyond just a symbolic experience, something beyond just the self. And I watched one of your videos where you had actually mentioned Jack Parsons and the Babylon working that he did. And a lot of my audience will know exactly what we're talking about here. And you had mentioned something about how during the Babylon working, he had actually witnessed a cigar-shaped object in the sky. And that was written in one of his diaries. It's something that I hadn't actually encountered before, that I hadn't read that before. And I wonder if you could share something about that and how that kind of connects to how some of these experiences are beyond just the, exploring the self and it's something even more than that.
Yeah, I don't recall that moment of talking about the cigar shaped thing he saw in the sky. He's sort of enigmatic to me. I have a sense of blindness around. It's sort of like I go, this guy's so important. This is so important, and it's sort of like, how that feeling of looking at ritual material before and after you understand the ritual or initiated. There's an aura about it beforehand. You go, ooh, this is significant. And then you have an experience, and then the understanding comes in. With Jack Parsons and this whole experience, I go, like, this is important, this is important. And it in part connects to the Stargate and gate program stuff, right? Like, so because of the influence of Scientology on those sorts of remote viewing programs. So, and that in part, the Babylon working was where L. Ron Hubbard was the scribe, and then he stole the boats from Jack Parsons and went to do his thing. And so that's actually a kind of a historic moment of genesis here of the connections between the occult and the UFO narratives, because we're seeing nowadays this sort of movement towards psionic that is obviously and thematically driven by Stargate and gate stuff. It's like that sort of connection to that sort of Scientology as applied remote viewing, or like Scientology applied as remote viewing. The physical stuff you're asking about, though, right? Like the things in the sky, right? The craft and that fascinates me. I have a sort of kind of complex around working with things like that, because these people I work with, right, like they have these experiences. It's not just Jack Parsons. It's not the secret here, right? Like, it's not just these guys. It's everyone. It's like people are experiencing this, and it's sort of around. I look at neurodivergent percentages and things like that. So it's like somewhere around 5% of the people who are of the population are in this sort of category of people that might have these experiences, and then they actually have these experiences. Is very sort of intense. I have not been able to find specific documentation of a manifestation of a craft or anything that is definitely a spacecraft. I have found documentation of things like, imagine like your Morgan experience, right? You're like sitting on your bed, the Morgan shows up. Imagine she's a gray instead of a Morgan, like a dark goddess, right? And imagine you saw a light in the sky before that, and that if you investigated your neighbors, they also saw that, and that another neighbor saw that light descend as a blob of light, but then it emerged into sort of a structured geometric metallic craft, right? And you go like, okay, So now that's the sort of stuff in that your other neighbor also saw the Morgan, but she, as the gray or whatever, but had body marks, right? And it's like, oh, this weird thing. And she had this dream about being injected by something, right? And then there's like creepy feds showing up around that experience. So that's the level of kind of physicality a lot of these people end up dealing with. But there's never a moment where that light in the sky comes down and is witnessed by all members of that party to do the body marks or like whatever. So it's actually, we can't, even with this, even if Jack Parsons saw it, right? Like whatever, even if like he has a video of it, it needs to actually come down and become those beings in that way for me to now believe it's anything other than a trick. That's why I say that physical bodies, I go on this, it's likely an apportation at best. But that doesn't matter. The fact of saying that those things don't resolve into the physical spacecraft in that way doesn't prove anything to me. It just proves that some NHI are very good at tricking some other people, and that some other people really are clued into this situation and are in charge of the UFO narratives, and therefore in charge of a huge section of at least the United States Defense Department budget, and maybe throughout, I'm looking at Sky Canada stuff. So I would go like, there's an intersection between that clique of psyopers and whatever is happening in Canada relating to the UAPs, which isn't much, but at least it's 20 pages of official documentation from Canada about UAPs. So that was again, another long kind of complicated answer to likely a simple question. So that's what you get with
No, I love it. Yeah, I love it. I'm not familiar with that term, apportation.
Yes, apportation, it comes from spiritualism. It is, Stanley Kribner documented it, and it is an idea that spirits, by way of spiritual mediumship, whatever, can bring a physical object from one place to the other. So the spiritual mediums of the 19th century would bring over cut gems, and they would like kind of bring them out of their orifices. It's obviously like sleight of hand in some experiences, but sometimes they're revered as actually objects from places, and there's in different spiritual traditions they talk about these things. And so apportation is a precedent for having physical objects come from wherever, different spiritual dimensions. Stanley Kribner, the dream researcher, documented dream apportations. So like sand in the bed of someone in wintertime in a northern climate who dreamed they were in a tropical bed or beach. Right, they wake up and wow, their toes are sandy. Isn't that cool? So like there's like obviously fallacies of thought around trusting that directly, but that serves as a precedent for how metamaterials and might come into this world, right? So that the physical evidences of the UFO.
And so what do you make of these claims that we hear sometimes from whistleblowers about actual bodies within crashed craft?
It's a very good question. I mean, so I go in cycles around this, to be honest. I go, oh, it's totally real. It's totally real. They totally have it. No, they don't have it. Oh, they totally have it. No, they don't have it. So just so you know, I swing on the pendulum in terms of whether or not they actually do. Right now, I sort of track those claims. I go, well, right now they're coming from David Grush, right? So that he used the term biologics. And so then there's other stuff, the body thing is coming up in different ways. And so then you have to track the literature of those claims back. Like, where does that actually come from? Well, then there's a mystery because there's special access programs. You can't talk about it in this way, that way, or the other way. But then if you go back to like, where are these coming from? A lot of those narratives around most of the body narratives really feel like repeats of narratives. They've been doing these narratives since the 50s, basically. It's just like it's refreshed. It's not, there's in the early 2000s there's been military whistleblowers coming forward saying these things, and all the way back to like forever. And it's hard to tell what's really actually truly there. I know that Robert Bigelow and Hans Adam II funded research into the Roswell crash. And that's in part the most famous UFO crash with the bodies. And so Robert Bigelow and Hans Adam II, who's the Prince of Liechtenstein, they funded studies into this, thinking, hey, perhaps this is real. But I know that that Robert Bigelow had sleep paralysis dreams. He had sleep paralysis dreams of little men who came in and did little things to his body. He couldn't move. He didn't know how to interpret them until he talked to Johnny Mack, who said they were likely alien abduction. But then Robert Bigelow goes, no, I'm not going to think about the fact I'm an abductee. These sleep paralysis dreams are not actually sleep paralysis or dreams. They're real, but they're too traumatic for me to get into. So instead of going through the regression experience himself, he devoted, I don't know, maybe $500,000 to $5 million to funding this research with other people. And he just took it as faith that these things are real. He knew it was real. That's why he says aliens are under our noses, because he had the dreams when he was a kid of the aliens doing the things to him. It was interpreted by John Mack, the head of Harvard psychiatry, right, who's saying these things are real. And so Bigelow and his buddy Hans Adam, who also had dreams that were interpreted by Jacques Vallée, who also doesn't recognize sleep paralysis symptoms. So he also is in that fallacy of real versus dream. They're all so then we have powerful individuals in the narrative who are experiencers of sleep paralysis, like we would recognize, like what you had with the Morgan. Well, that kind of thing is happening to them. I'm not saying that that's sleep paralysis, but I'm saying that kind of thing is happening to people where they're not discerning what is real and what is dream, or how that can be both. And then they turn to experts like Jacques Vallée and Johnny Mack to go, what is it? Is it real or dream? And they go, it's certainly real. And then they go, it's not a dream. So forget about all those dreamers and the dream research and all the sensitive souls that are connected to it, right? And all of the legacy and tradition. And let's just go to town with what we know. And so then they go, there's alien bodies in Area 51, and we could talk to them with our psychic powers and control things with our minds. And then it kind of snowballs, is sort of my understanding. Do you have a sense as the bodies, or like what's your take on that?
It's such a big question. Like, are we being, punked, intentionally, or is there something there? I go back and forth as well. Now, one of the other things, though, that I keep hearing being floated around is that on some sort of physical craft that was recovered, that there were hieroglyphics on it that resembled Enochian letters. Have you heard of this? I think you did a video where you mentioned it, and I wanted to get your take on that, since we're talking about the physical stuff right now.
Yeah, so there's several crafts that have been reported. One comes from Danny Sheehan, is a big name in he has a New Paradigm Institute. He's like a lawyer type guy associated with the U.S. like Nixon proceedings, like the Watergate, and he reports, and Scientology, by the way, and Scientology. So this is one of the, the sources of there's Enochian craft. So he describes seeing a photo in this really weird way of a craft that had Enochian like letters, and he sketches it out and puts it in the camera, and then a bunch of people go, that looks like Enochian or whatever, and they try to figure it out. So that's one of the sources, is Danny Sheehan putting that piece of paper of his remembered photo in this really weird kind of thing. So that go like yes and no. There's also there was Jake Barber, who was another military whistleblower. He was a psionic whistleblower. He talked about an egg, and there was confusion around that because there was a 4chan whistleblower at the same time that put forward another egg picture that had sort of these indentations to it that had glyphs in it as well, which look sort of Enochian. I have not seen the actual Enochian associated with craft in this way. The closest time I've seen Enochian associated with official military whistleblower is through Matthew Brown's work. And he did a really cryptic tweet, including an image of a Sigillum Diameth, which is central to Enochian magic. So he actually screenshotted actual Enochian materials. I don't think the letters, and that was connected to UFO stuff. But I have not seen photos of Enochian. I wouldn't. I mean, I would. I was kind of think it would be great for that to be the case, right? So
it would be pretty. It would be something. That would be something.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I can talk about the physicality of some of these things in terms of plasma orb. So this is one of the more wild things where I go like, okay, there's no physical bodies, there's no UFOs. This is the thing I've never wavered on. There's sort of like plasma sentient orbs that come down, or sort of like ball lightning. They was talked about in terms of the Earthlights hypothesis. They talk about it now in terms of I don't know what they call sentient orbs or something like that. They feel like you can actually film them. And they feel communicative. The Phoenix Light, one of the Phoenix Lights, which was a huge sighting in Phoenix, Arizona in 1997, that I believe is an actual example of this. And that was footage by Tom King, who precognitively dreamed themselves there. So they precognitively had a dream of filming stuff in the desert, moved to Phoenix, and then actually filmed the Phoenix Lights and became a world famous UFO filmer or whatever. So this is why I go like, dreams are real. I don't have any question about that. Whether or not those were actual UFO craft that are now held in Area 51 or plasma orbs, I think they're plasma orbs for what Tom King filmed. I think a lot of this stuff came from that a blimp. But the reason why I'm talking about them is because the plasma orbs sometimes fly in recognizable geometries. So geometries that, I mean, you spend a lot of time with building up your astral form with geometric work, right? With the Thelema or the lesser banishing rituals and things like that.
Right.
I'm not sure how. So there's a sort of geometric kind of understanding there. And so that geometry is in part why I looked at it in the sky, the footage of it. I go, this geometry is pointing me to something. I go, oh, I'm making sense of why the LBRP is meaningful, right? And so I'm talking about actual physical connections we can see in the world. And again, it's sort of like plasma is non-physical in a way, but it's actually there and sort of involved with these encounters in a way that feels measurable to me.
That's fascinating. And yeah, the plasma connection. I'd like to dive more into that. Like, can you tell me more about these plasma orbs, the consciousness connection, and that sort of thing?
Yes. So there's in terms of UFOs, you need to know that they're reported in certain ways, right? So people go like, "How you saw a UFO? What did you see? Was it a cigar shaped? Was it a tic tac? Was it a light in the sky? Was it a flying saucer? Was it an orb? Was it light?"
Mm-hmm.
And so there are in the UFO world, there's orbs, light orbs. They show up like Foo Fighters in the World War II. If you're familiar with that, there were orbs of light that followed things. Fukushima has film of orbs that are responding to, it seems like they're responding to the radiation. And so the theory here is that psychic mediums as well, they go, oh, you can photograph orbs, and oftentimes those are like dust particles showing up on photographs and that kind of thing. But it's sort of connected to that notion. The whole will-o'-the-wisp kind of light phenomena, that feels to me to be real in a way. The reason why it is hypothesized in the context of UFO encounters, because when you start to look at the actual encounters, people have. They have wildly divergent reports of the morphology, the shape of the UFO, the shape of the alien, but they always report blobs of light, oftentimes, that feel like they select people and interact with those people, who then report there's an entity here in the light. And like, there's a couple cases that are fascinating where they're like, it's like someone's in the light, the other people see the people in the light, and the people in the light go, I was talking to a space alien on a spaceship, right? And then but actually, physically, what would be described by consensus reality was they're like levitating in a beam of light, and then everyone blacks out or whatever. So that gives me the sense that there is perhaps a thing here. It was described in terms of, like I said, the Earthlights hypothesis in the 80s. Now it's coming up. It's now a whole genre of pseudoscience and science, I guess, right? And New Age stuff, and also it's people talk. They love to talk about plasma now. There's a whole electric universe idea. It
Right.
sometimes connects with dreaming, actually. Dan Winters talks about lucid dreaming and geometry and plasma. And so intuitively, I feel people are getting this connection. Scientifically, it takes a while to catch up with things. So that's all I'm pointing to here, is that in my lived experience, tracking things from what feels like actual physical evidence. So there seems to be physically an orb, plasma orb phenomenon that's mediated by magic, invocation, ritual, dreams, that sort of thing.
It's very fascinating to me, and I saw an interview recently, and I can't remember who it was with, but they had actual recordings of some sort of apparently conscious plasma orb, and at one point it starts morphing, and one of the shapes that it morphs into seems like anthropomorphic, and there was an actual video of it, and the interviewer, I remember, was like, that looks like an angel. And I thought that that was really interesting, and the interviewee was saying that sometimes they can intentionally call these forth, and that it feels like they're having some sort of communication with it, or at least some sort of conscious interaction. And I've had one experience in just a fully wakened state where I was visiting family, and I was quite young, but it was in Canada, and it was in a rural area, and I was looking out their kitchen window across like a huge field, and in the distance I could see this orange orb just kind of floating in the sky. And it wasn't the sun, because the sun was in a different spot. It wasn't the moon or Venus, because I'm very familiar with what Venus looks like. And it was larger than Mars or anything like that that you could potentially confuse it with. And it was slowly kind of moving across the sky, and then it would kind of move back. And it was just there for like a really long time, and I was fascinated with it, and I just was watching it, just observing it, and it would just move around, just kind of slowly moving around for a very long time. And I pointed it out to some other people that were there, family members, and they recognized that it was there, and they said, oh, weird. And then they went off to do whatever else that they were doing, having food or whatever. And I was like, how are you not fascinated by what's going on right here? Like, what is that? And so I have that experience, and I'm wondering, have you found any correlation between geomagnetic activity or other environmental factors? I think you kind of alluded to that with like the Fukushima thing, and like increased contact experiences.
Yes, yes, but I have not. I believe so. That's intuitively makes sense. There's data around that. Like the Earthlights hypothesis came forward in the 80s in part. They did a ton of work around tracking those things. There's like their books. It's like Earthlights, and then Michael Persinger I'm still getting into that research. That's from Canada too, by the way. Persinger's work with his God helmet, that all connected with this notion that these encounters were embodied in plasma or like ball lightning, and they had an effect on people. So the idea is that kind of anomalies cluster around like the 33rd parallel, or these certain underground things that have water and interactions. And so personally, I've been led on a journey to places like that, like Chaco Canyon, I feel is one of those places. The place I'm living now, which is like Nelson, BC. So that feels like kind of people call them vortex places or whatever. But I do feel like there are patterns there. My guides, my dream guides, tell me to pay attention to them. I am tracking data. I have dream data. I have 200,000 dreams in the database from the internet. I have like thousands of UFO reports. I'm collecting dream ET contact stuff, body mark information, and I basically am collecting stuff. And at some point, I'm going to shift over to go, what are the patterns here? What are the actual patterns here? It is, again, a sort of thing where, like I said, this sense of like tension around wanting to remember my dreams and wanting to just live a life of leisurely naps or whatever, and not having to like deal with heart-pounding nightmarish things that confuse my realities or whatever. Like I go, I don't know if I want to see those patterns. I don't know if I want to, and I haven't been necessarily ready yet. But in part, the test of the Morgan, right, is telling me like, you better, right? Like it's like, I've been collecting this stuff for a while, and actually, in order for me to work in the world in the way I'm called, I have to look at those patterns and kind of see that in the mirror. I would offer some hypotheses at this moment, right? They do cluster around places. They do cluster around times, these encounters. There is a sort of atmosphere that's more available to those encounters. Things can happen in dreams in a variety of ways because there's a variety of means of communication. But the dreams themselves have a sort of rhyme and reason to them, right? Like there's different types of dreams, and those types of dreams sometimes are associated with like orange orbs. Like orange orbs are a thing. Like you need, it's like orange orbs are actually like they describe them in specific ways. Like I like hearing about orange orbs. I don't like hearing about blue orbs oftentimes, right? Like because they have a different feeling to them. Now, just to be clear, like the world is very tricky, complex. Like you can't, if you even discern these patterns, like a dream dictionary, you can't take your dream dictionary literally, right? You have to work with it, and it's sort of like the patterns we see. And so that's all coming up for me right now. I mean, the sense around potent times for me, the solstices, the equinoxes, the obviously powerful times around the year are more powerful for me in contact. But again, I would start tracking that by reports, the UFO reports specifically of the orbs. And there's specific ways people describe them. You can find that out pretty quickly by looking through several reports. Oftentimes, like a otherworldly light, they describe it by the orange orb. Light that casts no shadow is another sort of hallmark of that. Yeah. So I would look to body marks. There's sort of body mark phenomena is absolutely fascinating to me, and it's people oftentimes will report puzzling marks on their bodies after dreams, and so they'll be like, "Oh, a demon attacked me. I have these scratches," right? Or, "Oh, I've been abducted by aliens because there's a triangle of dots," that sort of thing. I pay attention to those. I pay attention to the encounter, the report. I oftentimes analyze the geometry associated with them, going like, is this in line with the geometry we see in the sky, right? If it is, it's interesting to me. If it is, and so those markings, that data actually is raw data to be interpreted to reveal the patterns of contact. And when that happens, they happen in clusters, they happen in waves. There's ways that I can experimentally induce body mark reports, and so I know that that's possible, but I know there's also yeah you plant some seeds here and there, and then you get some reports. It's pretty interesting to me. but by way of suggestion, oftentimes. So because they're reported to communities, so it's not a closed system, let's say. But I've sort of explored that, so I know the level of how people could influence this system, and I still say that there is a definite body mark phenomena that's very communicative and is constellated with things like appors and like marks on the ground and things like that, and also other dream shamanic feats. And I'm taking time to talk about it because your audience likely has some experiencers by way of the percentage rates. This is not a 5% type of phenomenon. Maybe it's like a 5% of 1% sort of thing, but that's sort of clustered around people who are interested in the occult and dreams and things like that. So we can look to that data, I think, and I'll be doing that research in the next 10 years, sort of where I'm at with it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You kind of sparked something in me when you said, and pardon the pun, but with the ball lightning and the God helmet, where the God helmet being artificially inducing a bunch of electromagnetic frequencies into the cranium, and that potentially this ball lightning phenomenon could potentially cause electromagnetic effects which impact the human consciousness. And how intentional is that impact? That's a good question. Also, with the whole body marks and physical geometry and that sort of thing, and I know we're kind of getting into the weeds with this, and pardon this pun as well, but crop circles. What do you make of that? And I've seen a connection between orbs and crop circles come up here and there.
Cool. Yeah. You're getting all the good stuff. Crop circles. So I like the alien bodies thing. I have a sort of thing that I oscillate from belief to skepticism. And there's a thing that unwavers. The connection of the crop circles to orbs is unwavering in terms of the skepticism and credulity. Right now, I understand my working theory around crop circles is there's a couple different levels to it. The first level is they are parallel psyop to, just as alien abduction was a psyop, or some alien abduction narrative in the 90s were a psyop within the United States. So too was there a psyop in England relating to the alien crop circle. The alien crop circle, alien abduction. Same sort of thing, same sort of manipulation by intelligence community. That's the idea. And it's an interpretation of a magical phenomena, and it's the aggressive interpretation of a magical human natural phenomena that relates to entity encounter. So in the case of alien abductions, I've been going, okay, so it's sleep paralysis with a magic entity interacting with you like the Morrigan that was aggressively interpreted by an expert to be alien abduction. So it's this narrative of alien abduction covers up something very, very true and magical, which is your connection with the spirit world. So the alien crop circle is another natural human phenomena that is related to orbs, just as sleep paralysis is oftentimes related actually to like orb stuff, the entity encounter. The idea here is that it is an offer. It's like a secret priesthood of people that make mandalas in corn, and that is a shamanic kind of activity that invites spirit entities. And kind of precedent I'm using to understand that is in Tibetan Buddhism, which I practiced for a while. There would be kind of mandala practices made out of food. You make these things out of food. You make these complex circles out of food, and spirits show up and teach you things. And so the case of the people making crop circles is they're offering food. They're doing so in a religious way, like the hoax. If there are hoaxers, they relate to very specific people that are identifiable in the world, Doug and Dave being one of them. And those people actually testify to a sort of shamanic understanding of what they're doing. They're not testifying to a hoax. They're not testifying to the fact that they're making people believe in aliens. So what I believe they did was this sort of kind of maybe prankster activity to start, but it quickly, like if you start working with circles in geometry, like if you really do with an open-hearted way, like you do with dreams, right? You work with those, you work with your dreams talk to you. You work with circles, they start talking to you. Like, and this is I think an open secret in mathematics at this point, is like all the best mathematicians talk to entities or whatever through their dreams and circles or whatever. So I think that's what's happening. And I think that
Reminds me of the movie Pi.
yeah, I watched that as a kid. I'll have to get back into that. What connection do you see? Yeah.
Well, this guy who is basically obsessed with the number pi, and he ends up studying Kabbalah, and he gets so into it that basically he makes connection with some sort of, God. Essentially, he connects with God through calculating pi, and he has all this computer equipment, and the substances end up forming on the computer boards and things like that. I just and one of his mentors ends up warning him not to go too deep into it because it could drive him insane. It's just a really interesting avant-garde film that connects pi with circles and divine consciousness, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds about right. If you go too deep with this stuff, can drive you mad and bring you to God. That makes sense to me. I see that. Yeah, so I mean, I offer a kind of skeptical perspective in part of crop circles because I've tried making them and know how entrancing it is to do what they would do to hoax those things. I know what it's like to work with geometry. I know what it's like to do a Tibetan Buddhist mandala meditation, and I know what it's like to do an invocation. And I go, seems really powerful to me. Maybe the psyop is to keep people unaware of the fact that they can do this stuff. They think it's aliens abducting them and making the crop circles, when actually it's humans who have the capacity to invoke these things and do whatever is associated with those invocations, which for me is to mediate the human's relationship with the spirit world for the benefit of themselves and their community. That's what it's about for me. That's why I'm talking about these things. Yeah. So
yeah, we've seen that throughout history, going back millennia, right? Those in power trying to be the only mediators between humans and the spirit realm. And something that I've been thinking about lately or contemplating is the widespread legalization and normalization of cannabis, which suppresses REM sleep. And I'm wondering, is that an intentional, or is there a component of that that's an intentional attempt to sever the common person from these experiences, from their own direct communications with the spirit realm?
yeah, I mean, it's hard to say with the case of cannabis, widespread legalization. I believe anything coming out from the kind of like, yes, that's like by default my orientation to go, yeah, they are suppressing it. Now, whether or not it's intentional is a question for me, and this gets into the complexity thing, because we were talking about orbs and crop circles, and I go like, wait, I wanted to say that I actually believe that some of these plasma orbs have ET consciousness through them. So it's essentially like dealing with aliens, right? Like that's a kind of a conclusion I have. And so I go like, but even if I offer a skeptical point of view, I'm bringing in, actually they are connecting us with perhaps what you think they are. And so in that same way, like with with understanding the government or the powers that be right? There, like from the Industrial Revolution forward, it looks like there's, I mean, to be honest, from the 3rd century on, it looks like there's a really concerted effort to burn people who understand these things and to really homogenize our sleep patterns and how we go into trance and how we talk about them. It's just like, but who is actually doing that? Is there like a group of men or women somewhere going like, they better sleep in only one cycle of sleep, not 2 cycles of sleep. Otherwise, they'll have really powerful hypnopompic, hypnagogic, and lucid dream experiences. Like, we have to invent magic lights to keep them awake up until 10 p.m. and make them wake up at not before 9 a.m. I don't think anyone's particularly going like, I mean, I'm sure there's like some guy in like Washington going like, this is the best way to do it. But I think actually that it just sort of happens, and it's like, who's controlling this? We can get into like kind of mystical, archonic, kind of Gnostic ideas going like, are there evil forces doing this sort of thing? And I go, yeah, probably there are, but it's sort of breaking it down to that kind of, I like acknowledging that there are these sort of powers that be that are controlling, but then also going, in my personal experience, when I fought against them, not directly, but in my own life and lifestyle, I make contact. It happens. I talk about it. I've been talking about it. I've been working with people in UFO abduction, and I've been like reversing the whatever mind control this way and bringing back memories that way, and doing dream shamanism stuff, and people talk about it. And I've been contradicting UFO claims for years and that sort of thing, and I've not been controlled, or like there's not been an individual targeting of me. And so in that way, I go, actually, we're dealing with spiritual forces in this world and not necessarily human forces. That being said, there are some elements within the UFO community I would never cross, and I'm intelligent about how I speak because I use discerning, because there are individuals who are very well known, but it's like a bully in a school. I'm going to hang out in the lunchroom. I'm not going to hang out in the gym with them. Basically, it's like, I'm going to hang out in the library. That's my choice, right? Like, I'm not going to try dating their girls or whatever. But like, there are people like that in this community. But if you stay away from them, like there's no act of control against it. And so I would kind of deduce that about the world in general, that there might be some groups here and there that have power and trying to control it, but just sort of happening.
So I feel like there's some takeaways here. I feel like the question of whether is it a dream or is it real, that is a false that's a false question to begin with. You're creating this dichotomy that isn't really there in the first place, and forcing it to be categorized in one way or another. And the other major takeaway that I'm seeing is that ultimately there's a empowering message that it is within your power to make contact with these intelligences directly, and that we don't need to rely on whistleblowers or disclosure from government or any of these things, external intercessors, that we can, if we desire it, then we can make that contact ourselves. If contact through dreams becomes widely accepted, how might that change our understanding of consciousness and reality, would you say?
Yeah, that would be pretty significant. Pretty significant. We would move from this sort of, we talked about it like this wake-centric notion to more, right? And in my own life, when I've shifted, that was the biggest change in my life, right? And when I actually truly deeply went from, oh, dreams are meaningful, ha ha ha, maybe you could do out of body, ha ha ha, maybe there's psychic dreaming, to going like, no, there's 100%, I'm more than my body. No one can convince this otherwise, right? Like, we will have that moment as a society, and then we will have this sort of shift, right? From going, oh, maybe the UFO space aliens will give us free energy technology, to go, nope, I know for a fact that I can go to bed, induce a dream, have an encounter, and come back with something innovative that's beneficial to me and my society, like that for me, I feel is the most powerful thing. And when I've truly said yes in periods of time, right? Like I'm still on this side of the test of the Morgan, let's say, right? I still have my to-do list after this call to take those ritual actions to say yeah for, but it's really like when I've said yeah to the dreams and I've been like, show me where to go. I'm lost in this world. Dear dreams, right? They show up in a way that's so beautiful and so orchestrated that I go, I'm both the magical author of my life and just a participant in this beautiful thing. And so I can see that happening, like, because it's crazy now in the world. It is the craziest time I've ever lived in, and I don't know what's happening in terms of politics, and I'm like really concerned about that at some level. But I go like, actually, I'm so excited that people are paying attention to whistleblowers who are lying about the US government's engagement with like UFOs, because this means we're like tuning into this dream shamanic call. Like if anyone's listening to whistleblowers and being like excited about it, this shouldn't feel bad that they're being duped in part by like a psyop. It's just very exciting in general. It's like hearing a call, and that's where we are in the society. And I feel it's a little bit of a kind of grammar quibble to go like, these things aren't actually bodies, right? Like, or we don't have proof of that, but there's so much more around that that's very exciting. And so I could see, I'm very hopeful in terms of where we are because of that empowerment I've experienced of my dreams in my life in a way that has humbled me as an ego to go, I'm out of control with it, and it's the dreams that are.
That inspiration from the spirit realm, as you mentioned, it doesn't even hold a candle to AI, right?
Yeah,
it's almost like AI is a counterfeit of that in a sense.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's the sort of feeling I have. The strong incubation. Like I wrote five books in the last 5 years on these subjects, more or less, and is literally going to bed going like, I'm so curious about this, and it gives the full embodied experience that is, I mean, I have to work it, right? Like you have to do the dream work afterwards. You have to write down your dreams. You have to do the work to make sense of it. You have to build the rapport with yourself. That's why it's like everyone's universally available to that, to have those moments of change and connection. And then there's like the actual practice of it. Like, I mean, you've been practicing for 30 years in terms of occult stuff, right? Like it's just, you just have to do time with it. And people
and dreaming for even longer.
yeah. So,
but yeah, it's incredible the fully immersive experiences that you can have. It's just, and I see on Reddit, for example, on like the lucid dreaming subreddit, people are like, are you really experiencing these things as real as your waking experience? And people are like, yes, yeah, it's fully immersive, just as real feeling as the waking experience. And in fact, the waking experience is a type of simulation as well.
Yeah, I always turn to, so this is maybe the last tidbit I'll share with you, but I turned to Alan Worsley, who was one of the first lucid dreamers to scientifically prove lucid dream. He talked about that period of time between waking and dreaming, and he said it's ultra real. He described it as ultra real, and these interactions he had, he described them as like robots that operated on his body. He said it explained the UFO abduction syndrome to him. This is what people probably are experiencing, weird beings coming in their room. But he used the term ultra real, and that really was like shook me after I read that. I go like, that was my experience with dreams. They're ultra real, like these dreams, these types of things, in a way that convinces me, in a way that is just unconvincible. I know you've had those experiences. It feels, you can feel it in someone else. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all these insights. It was a really enjoyable conversation, and I'm sure we could probably go on for much longer, but I want to respect your time. And if somebody wants to go further with this and explore what you're doing, can you share a bit more about how they can connect with you or your projects, or even just explore this further themselves?
Yeah, so the best way to explore this further yourself is to touch into your desire for contact or dreams and make some sort of expression of it. Remember your dreams at night, start a dream journal. That's what I recommend. And the stuff I talk about is universally accessible, right? Like I'm not someone that holds information back. But generally the information is like, humans have been doing this. We just need to get up to speed with what we've been up to. The way to interact with me is through the D-SETI website. So that's dseti.org. You can send me an email, daniel@dseti.org, to initiate a conversation. I work with people through a variety of ways. The primary way is through session work. So I go on a journey with people. It's about 3 sessions that initiates them into this way of being. So we take the first session is to talk about life. Second session, we introduce hypnotic shamanic dream states. It's a trance that we go into. It's like hypnosis, it's like visualization, and we talk about the experience as it arrives. Third session, we go do something in that world together. And that really is the journey I take everyone on. To start that, you can book a consultation, and there's links on my website to do that. The consultation is free, no obligation. It's usually about an hour. People share their dreams with me. I talk about it. I love those conversations. And then if it feels good, right, you have to click with me, right? And if you don't click with me, it's not bad. Like it's not bad for me. It's not bad for you. I get it. We get to have a nice conversation. Then we like schedule sessions and things like that. And I've been doing this for 5 years, so I do the same thing with everyone, and I say the same things to everyone. So if you just want to do those things and hear the things I say and don't want to pay me any money, because this is a sort of a thing where you should be able to get it for free, but if you want to, you can pay me to work with. Like, you go through my course. I put it all in my course. It's a 3-hour course. I say all of the things I say to everyone. I point to all of the literature that I pointed to in this podcast. Like, it's there. You can access it. You can read the literature, and I lay it all out. And that's a really good way to engage too. And that's the course is called From UFO Disclosure. No, it's UFO Disclosure and Dream Phenomena. That's for free on my website, dseti.org. So, and there's a special URL, but I don't know it at the time, so I'm going to give you that link. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'm really excited about the synchrony involved here. Thank you to your audience for listening and being engaged with occultism and dreaming. I mean, this is actually, believe, the best way we can be politically active is through dreaming and like effective in the world. I truly believe that. So I'm really like glad to see that there are communities out there and people talking about it. And I'm really glad you reached out and are communicating on behalf of Abraxas and the Morrigan. And I'm excited to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, maybe we can have another conversation at some point and talk about Abraxas, because that's something we didn't manage to get to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, again, thank you so much for this conversation. I also do have some courses available at a very low rate of $5 a month to get access to all of them. If people want to explore through that method as well, that's available, an option. Plus, both of us have a lot of free information on our YouTube channels that people can explore if they want to get more into this. And there'll be a link to your channel in the description as well. So again, thank you so much. And I hope to stay in touch and have a great rest of your day and success on your projects.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.